I studied, when I was a kid, I'm from the Northwest, I'm from Spokane, Washington. And so when I was a kid, I was really exclusively exposed to Hollywood cinema, I would say. And then I didn't really have any interest in, I mean, beyond as a spectator in cinema when I was a child. And then I got very interested in art and I wanted to be a painter, and that's what I studied when I was at university. And when I graduated, I moved to New York and I thought I would become a painter. But I had, I think I wasn't very in touch with reality at this time. And so once I arrived in New York, I had some financial problems and I thought I should leave. So I did, and I got a job in France. And at this time, I kind of I found this school in France called Le Frenois, which is kind of a school for video and film, but for artists. And so I went to this school, and that was kind of when when I was at the school, I made like a performance piece, and then I made a sculpture. So even at this time, I wasn't so interested in cinema, but it was really after going to the Frenois that I became interested in film. And at this point, I'd been living in Europe for, I guess, like 5 or 6 years. So I did everything I know about production, I learned in Europe. So it's really a mix. I think my influences in terms of, stuff I kind of absorbed as a younger person, and then the more hands-on aspects, which I think are more European. Well, so for Buchanan is, I would describe it as a like, I guess, a tragic comedy, because when I wrote the film, I kind of wrote it in blocks. It's a film that takes place over like 4 seasons. So I kind of, for me, there was a change of mood kind of from season to season. But it is set in kind of like a military context, and it concerns like a group of spouses of soldiers and kind of how they deal with their solitude when their other halves are far away. And so in some respects, they're kind of, it's almost like they have a problem of what to do with this time. So there's parts of the film where they kind of like hit on each other. There's various types of like couples being formed and then disappearing. And then they learn like sports, and they kind of like invent names for their vaginas or penises. And so there's this idea of just like leisure time. And then there's the bucolic aspect, because it's true that it's set on a military base, but you never really see many buildings. It's kind of a very diffuse installation in the woods. I liked the idea of this. I spoke about this briefly last night, but I also was interested in kind of like animal documentaries, or this group of people who are together, but they're not really a family, and you don't even really know if they like each other that well. They're just there together, and kind of the relationships that forces upon them. It's like their relationships are very like pragmatic because of this. Like they have like a sexual need, and so they have to find a partner in this limited configuration. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I have to say, I certainly didn't think very much about queer cinema while I was making it. It's only a subject I've had to address like once the film was finished. I think in some respects, I think that's a little bit like reductive, because I think there's lots of other things going on in the film. Like, for example, there's a character in the film named Trevor, who's a young soldier, and he kind of appears in like the last quarter of the film. And he's a heterosexual character, but he's an important character to me in the film. And also, he's also a really unrealistic character, because, for example, I think a lot of people are focused on, when they watch the film, on the queer character of Roger, the protagonist, and like what is or isn't real about the portrayal of him as like a gay man. But for example, Trevor is also a very unusual. Like if you remember in the film, physically he looks kind of like a teenager. He looks kind of like a kid from like a Gus Van Sant movie. He's like kind of like looks like 19 with like long hair and kind of like a melancholy poet. But in the film, he's like a veteran from a war and he has like 2 children. So there's also a very like kind of like his whole physicality is very unrealistic for that kind of person, and it's the same for many of the characters. So I would say it's more about like, I guess, like, I don't know, kind of like normativity, like linguistically and physically, and also in terms of gender, but not exclusively in terms of gender. Non, le Film du Bal is a production company, but there was some financing that came from contemporary art in France. Well, I think definitely in terms of how I make the film, the fact that like I'm very comfortable with like appropriation. Like for example, the film, most of the dialogue is appropriated, which like I'm really comfortable with. But I think many like auteurs, like cinéastes, really are want to tell a story that's like they feel is more like original to them or something. So in terms of how I produce it and my ideas, I'm definitely drawing on a lot of stuff that's pretty like common for contemporary artists. But for me, it's quite a practical problem because it's just the budget to make a film, even a film such as mine, which has a very low budget, is usually more than contemporary art. They're just different economic worlds. So I'm trying to exist in the world of cinema just because it corresponds to the needs of these projects. So for me, it's very pragmatic. I don't really see them as, and in the interior of the films, I don't really see them as different. I think it could be shown anywhere. Yeah, the film. Well, the film premiered at Locarno last summer, and then it's been in quite a lot of festivals in Europe. It was in Rotterdam, and in Lisboa, and a lot of other festivals, which I didn't go to many of them. And it also showed at New Directors, New Films in New York in March. And actually, it's being released on Wednesday in France. So if anyone's in France, please come see it. And it will also be shown on French TV actually on the 28th of June. So, en France too.
And I think last question, what are you working at now?
With a friend of mine in New York, James, we've written a script that we're hoping to shoot in Texas. So I'm looking for an American producer, and I met someone. I was there in March, so I'm trying to get this project going, but I'm not exactly sure what kind of calendar it's on. And I'm making a documentary for French TV this summer, and I'm also making another short film, but I'm not exactly sure when I'll shoot that. Well, I think when you're a filmmaker, you kind of have like a vampiric relationship to film. So I'm always just looking at like, oh, that works, oh, that doesn't work. But I watch a lot of like mainstream cinema because I just want to have an idea kind of what like a contemporary public's idea of just like simple things like pacing, like how short a shot should be, or like how explicit a plot needs to be, and just because I think, especially in France, a lot of like cinephiles, I think, kind of like get out of touch with like the reality of like a contemporary spectator. So I do watch a lot of like mainstream movie for those kind of reasons. I don't know. I watch a lot of different stuff, and then I also watch a lot of like art house films. But I don't know if I really have. I mean, I'm interested in more like the career paths of a lot of directors. Like I'm intrigued by like Catherine Bigelow's career path because she's someone who was involved in like conceptual art in the 70s, and then she made kind of like these like genre films, and then Point Break, and because she's a woman, it's kind of, you know, it's an interest. I don't know. I mean, I'm like interested in her career without necessarily being like a huge fan of all of her films. So, um, and I guess I'm kind of interested in Gus Van Sant for the same reason, because he kind of like ping pongs between, like he'll sometimes make like a really interesting film and then sometimes make like a really like weird like commercial film. So I don't know. It's also I think kind of nice because obviously when you're a filmmaker you have anxieties about making something like really awful to see like other people who like really are like all over the place. So I don't know. I don't know. Bad answer, but but an honest one.